So, good afternoon. My talk will be in English. Si vous avez des questions en français, pas de souci. Mais ça a été annoncé en anglais, donc on va le faire en anglais. My name is Damien. I will tell you a little story of different agile transitions I've been in. So I've called it the Agile Budgeting Saga. So let's see who's in the story. We have different people there. So on the left, we start with Luc Lumiere. Luc Lumiere, he's the business guy. He's the guy with the ideas. He's who's Luc Lumiere in the room here? We have business people. 1, 2, maybe, no. We have Paul, the product owner. A few product owners in the room, maybe. All right, great. We have Marie. Marie is the manager. Who's the manager? All right, 1, 2, all right, perfect. We have Agnes. Agnes is a representative of the Agile team. Then we have Carl. Carl is our customer. Yuma, who is our UX expert, user experience. And Eva, who is an external expert. So this is the cast for the story. And I promise you, I don't have any quotes of Steve Jobs in my presentations. So we start with the story. Luc Lumiere. Luc has an idea. So Luc, he has an idea. He thinks about it a lot, even during the weekends, and he thinks his idea is valuable. So Luc goes to Marie and tells Marie, Marie, I have an idea. What do you think of my idea? Marie says, it sounds like a great idea. So what happens next? You know the story, of course. Marie asks for a business case. So Luc, he goes, all right, what do I need to provide to Marie? So Marie says, oh, no problem, I have a nice template. This is the business case template. I need a description of the idea, I need possible solutions, I need risks and assumptions, I need the planning, of course, a cost estimation, and, of course, the return on investment calculation. So, can you give it to me before we can start? Luc is a bit puzzled. He needs help because, of course, the description of the idea, that's no problem. He knows his idea. But for the rest, the solutions, he doesn't have a clue. Risks and assumptions, I don't know. Planning, I don't know. Cost estimations, how should I know? And return on investment, well, I'm not a finance guy, so I don't know. So Luc, he goes to Paul. But Paul is the agile guy. Ta-ta-ta. So Luc goes to Paul and he asks Paul for help. Can you give me something like a business case? And Paul says he's being agile. So Paul says, no, I'm sorry. This is very interesting, but the solutions, we don't know. The risks and assumptions, we'll handle that later. The planning, we don't need a planning. Cost estimations, we don't want cost estimations. And return on investment, no, we measure value. Oh yeah, great. So Luc, he knows that with those answers, his idea will never pass through Marie. So what does he do? He goes to SharePoint and he picks up some old lessons learned documents from other project managers and product owners before. So he writes down a description. He writes down possible solutions and risks and assumptions, a planning, cost estimations, and return on investment of things that he found on SharePoint of the dozen projects that went on before him. So look, he has a plan, and it looks like this. It's the big IT black box, and it will take 2 years. And he has a plan A and a plan B, and he has a lot of possible risks, of course. Anybody recognizes this plan? Okay. So, look, he wants to go to Marie, but he feels his plan is a little bit fishy. So, he goes back to Paul. So, Paul, tell me, how do you convince Marie if you want to invest in an idea? I know that I have a plan, I will propose this plan to Marie, but how do you do that? Well, Paul says, with business cases, the problem is we need big budgets. We need to define risks. We have very hazardous planning and a slow return on investment, and we're probably building not even what we need to build. So we don't use business cases. So what do we use? We want to use something small, but something valuable. We call this, for example, a prototype. Yeah? With a prototype, we need a small budget. We have small risks. We have a very transparent planning. We have a very fast return on our investment. And we are building exactly what we need to build. So we have something that is very small, but very interesting. And it might maybe even only take a week to build it. Interesting, a prototype or a business case. So how do you do this? Well, Paul brings in Carl. Carl is a customer. He brings in Yuma and he brings in Agnes. And he says to them, okay, let's see what we can do with a prototype. We need less risks and assumptions, okay? We need a plan, because in a plan, a business case was, a plan was asked in the business case, so we need a plan. Maybe we will use something like an impact map to create a plan in our world, yeah? We need fast return, and we need a planning, a development timeline, but we need to build the things right at the right time. So we will probably use a user story map to do that. Yeah? An impact map combined with a user story map, what's the result of that? That's a clear backlog. A backlog, a list of tasks prioritized on what we need. So with this team doing a prototype, an impact map, a user story map, and creating a backlog, we probably need 2 weeks, and we have a clear plan and a fast return on investment. This is the effort we need to convince Marie to start with an ID. And he asked, look, how much time do you spend on your business case with your teams planning on something that you don't have in your hands? So Luc is intrigued. He's not convinced yet. So he says, you handle a little bit risks and assumptions during 2 weeks, but how do you do this during the implementation? Well, Agnes answers, and she said, first we prioritize the backlog like this. The backlog, remember, is the list of tasks. Everybody's familiar with the backlog? All right. It's a list of tasks, right? Well, the prioritization of the backlog is very important. We tend to do this by feature, but what we tend to forget is that we need to prioritize the backlog also by risk and by effort and by learnings. So we don't only look at the value that the task will bring in the backlog, but we need to prioritize the backlog also with the risks. We want to do the risky thing first. We want to handle risky things before spending too much money. Especially in a prototype, we want to prototype what's most risky because we want to learn from it. So secondly, we work in iterations and we ask for feedback. So we're probably working in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, whatever. There's a big debate around that. I don't want to go into this. But the thing is that we want to ask Carl if he's happy. So bringing in things to Carl very closely, and not a user representative, but you need your users to do that. And we need to ask for feedback to Carl. Is this what you are looking for? So only then we can narrow down the risks and the assumptions that we're working on. All right? That means that we deliver the right thing at the right time. And by delivering frequently, the risk is going down and the assumptions is going down. So every, for example, here 4 weeks, we can discuss with our customer Carl and ask if this is okay, this is the risk, and the risks are going down every time we can deliver and show him something. So Luc goes to Agnes because he has some questions for the team. And he said, okay, that's all fine. We handle risks, we handle assumptions, but how do you handle deadlines? I know that Marie will ask me when will it be finished, and what if a new deadline comes into the project? Well, firstly, we know how many features we can handle during one iteration. That's our planning, that's our backlog, that's easy. So by prioritizing the features in the right way, we get a transparent, but still a flexible planning. So when a deadline comes in, if something needs to be delivered within, for example, 6 weeks, we know exactly where to put this deadline in the backlog, because we know when it will be delivered. Of course, we need to shuffle priorities, but we need to discuss the impact of the other features when we shuffle something in, so that's clear. So this is the flexibility we need. So Luc wonders, fine, I can handle risks and assumptions. I know how I can handle deadlines, but how will I ever estimate my project with such a moving backlog? How can I give a figure to Marie? So Marie needs to know how much my idea will cost to be entirely developed. Can you answer this? He goes to Paul. And Paul says, well, we don't know your idea all too well. So actually, that's not the right question to ask. The question is, how many iterations are you willing to risk, or are you willing to invest in your idea? Remember, we started with a prototype. Something small, something interesting. And we asked Marie, well, is this the value and the return you need? And are you willing to invest in this prototype? Remember, it was something small, so big, small budgets, small risks. Well, that's exactly the same thing we will do at the end of each iteration. If Marie says yes, at the start of the prototype, when we start building, it will be the same thing. At the end of each iteration, we will ask Marie, do you acknowledge the value of this iteration when we deliver something? We invested in the previous features. Is this still okay for you? What's foreseen in the backlog? And the next feature we want to invest in, do you agree in investing a little bit more into this feature? So, knowing that risks are going down, assumptions are going down, and that we built iteratively, Marie learns and she's in full control. So she's very happy because the balance between value and investment is always on the good side, right? So every time we check the value against the cost at each iteration. During those validation points, we see the risks going down, the assumptions going down, and we see that the value is going up. And of course, the cost is going up because we agree on investing every time at the iteration. So, what is expected from Marie then? Well, in fact, you see the difference here. With a big program or a big project, Marie needs to decide on big budgets, big risks, bad planning, or hopefully she has a planning somewhere. The scope is not entirely clear, and we will probably have a very slow return on investment. And it will probably take maybe months or years before we can measure the return. So with smaller ideas cut down into a backlog, into features, we can decide on smaller budgets, smaller risks, and a better planning. And that's what Marie needs to do. She needs to lower her decision points. Of course, it will be more frequent, but when lowering a decision point, you have a correct planning and return, a faster return on investment. That means that we're also capable of stopping investments before it's too late and before even starting with nice-to-haves. We're so used to writing down everything we need into scope documents that sometimes we write everything down that we don't even know or don't even use. When you deliver frequently, we can stop at times that you can say, okay, this is not needed anymore. My cost is getting higher than my value. We can stop here. If you do it frequently, there is a point in time where you can say, or where Marie can say, okay, this is fine now. We will stop it. How many times have I heard, we cannot stop now because we put in, I don't know, 2 million euros in this project, so we can now not stop now. But that's because you don't have the decision points and you don't have the return of the frequently delivered things that you have in agile ways. Okay, so look, he's confident, he goes to Marie and he says, Oh, sorry, I forgot my ta-ta-ta. And he says to Marie, this is my plan A. This is my big IT black box. And it will take 2 years. And you see that the value will come probably at the end of plan A or maybe plan B. Or this is my plan that I created with Paul. And it looks like this. We will deliver frequently, and you will see that the risks and the assumptions will go down. What do you prefer? What do you prefer? Who's for plan A? Hands up. Ooh, one still. Great. Plan B? Yes. Marie likes the idea, of course, but Marie is a manager, so she still has questions. She needs fixed price, fixed scope. Okay, so can we still work with fixed scope projects? Well, fixed scope is nothing more than a backlog that's not too shuffly, I would say, right? But the thing is that a backlog needs to be flexible because new insights are coming. Remember, you're talking to Carl. Every time you talk to Carl, there's a possibility that the backlog might shift. Now, in Agile, we're very scared of moving backlogs, but it doesn't happen so frequently. It's just new insights that are coming in, so let's welcome them into our backlog. So fixed projects, fixed scope projects, of course, no problem. What about fixed time and project deadlines? Well, fixed time, remember we use the user story map. The point in Agile is that you want to go live as fast as possible. You see the orange line there. This is sometimes called an MVP. It's also a big debate. But the point is that you need to go live as fast as possible. And when you have a fixed time project, we want to go live before the fixed time project, before the fixed time deadline. So as fast as possible and handling deadlines like I told before by shuffling the backlog if you need to. So if you ensure the first flow, if you ensure the MVP, you go live with the MVP as soon as possible. And afterwards, if you have time, if you have resources, and if it's needed, you can build incrementally until the deadlines arrive, right? So assure you go live way before the deadline. No stress there. What about fixed budget? Well, no problem here. If you have a budget limit, you know the number of iterations you can foresee with your team. And you can say, okay, if there's no shuffle in the backlog, you know where we will end up with our fixed budget. So you set your budget limits and you try to put everything that is nice to have under the line. Of course, you can only do this with a stable team. That's something very important. I'll come back to that later. So what if the team don't have the right skills? Well, that's another problem. We need to ensure that the learnings are coming into the team incrementally as well. So by using WIP limits, I don't know if you know the concept of WIP limits, but this is something you can read about on the internet. The WIP limits are there for knowledge sharing. You can start pair programming with WIP limits and things like that. So that's very important. Use experts to assist people in prototypes and in spikes. If you're in the middle of a development project and you need to learn something new, bringing an expert for an iteration or two. Yeah. And leave room for learning. More on expertise, if you need to outsource a project, well, sometimes Marie, she said, okay, let's put the responsibility to someone else, to a development team or an external team. Well, if you want your flexibility in your backlog, if you want learnings from your team, if you want learnings to bringing learnings into your organization, and if you want to keep control of your project, you need to hire the skills and not hire the scope. So bring in experts, bring them to your teams, help them, and so that the learnings can go into your organization. If you hire scope, if you hire teams who build the thing externally, you will never bring in the learnings into your organization. So Marie is hard on the facts and soft on the people, as we say. She asks about metrics. Of course, she needs metrics. So she needs predictability, a forecasting, and a cost control. Well, everything is linked to pace. And it's very easy to enter metrics into Agile systems. The only thing you need to track for a start is feature. The start date of a feature and the end date of the feature. That means when is the ID coming into the system and when is it coming out of the system. And the time in between that, that's what you want to measure. That's your lead time, right? This is one diagram that you can use for this. You see the value on the left and the time on the right. The delivered features are in blue and the features that are in progress are in red. Well, the time you have between those two lines, that's the amount of work that is in progress at a given point in time, right? And if you look at the diagram on the other side, that's the time you need before an ID comes in and an ID comes out, right? So if you look at Scrum, if your teams are working in Scrum, the diagram should look like this. You see the start of an iteration, the amount of work is high in the middle of the iteration, then it drops until you deliver your sprint. Second sprint, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. That's how a cumulative flow diagram should look in a Scrum environment. Your predictability should be okay because your features that you're delivering at every sprint are finished or should be finished. If they're not, then you should look into it. If you work Kanban, that's how it should look. The predictability should be as small as possible, so the amount of work going into the Kanban system and going out to the Kanban system should be as small as possible. The time should be as small as possible, right? So you want to be as fast as possible in the Kanban way. So this is how it should look like. So only by measuring the start date and the end date of a feature, you can manage and you can have the right metrics of your system. The teams should look at things that are exceptions in this. So if you have features going in here and coming out very, very late, those are the things that you should look into. For example, during your retrospectives, you can discuss, okay, someone should take a look at this features. This feature took 6 weeks more than expected. How come? So that's the focus of the teams. Marie asks, yes, but I know that the Scrum Masters, they use velocity and burn down charts and things like that. Well, burn down charts are not management material. So this is only for the teams and leave it with the teams. It's not for Marie to look into. So, some key takeaways here. How do you budget your projects then? Well, do not try to estimate your projects anymore. I've been in both worlds. I've been a project manager for 10, 15 years, and I've been in the Agile world for probably 10 years, so you can guess my age now. Do not try to estimate your project. It doesn't work. In the first world, it didn't work. We tried it. In the second world, it doesn't work. So you need to estimate your cost. You need to estimate your teams. How much resources do I have? And with these teams, with this cost, you do the right thing at the right time. So instead of estimating project budgets, you say, this is my team, this is what I can do with my team, and this is the things with your backlogs and your prototypes that we will handle. So how do you forecast the budget then? Well, the forecast is you have so many teams that cost so many, and this is your forecast cost for next year, for example. If someone asks you, well, we need an IT budget, this is your IT budget, this is your people, your cost, your teams. They will do the thing that you ask them to on the backlog at the moment that is required. But this is how you budget an IT budget, of course, only on the resource part. So, the 3 questions are, how many projects are currently started? This is your work in progress. I can ask maybe you guys, in your companies, how many projects are going on? Maybe 10, maybe 50, maybe more. we do a lot of projects all together, right? Are your teams stable enough to tell you when they will deliver something? This is the how. So that's the second question you need to ask yourself. And what are the crucial new projects, only the crucial new projects that you want to start? This is your priority. So the main thing is stop starting and start finishing, right? Use your teams to start the projects, to stop the projects, that you started already and that are going on, or dare to stop your investment and dare to stop your projects. So do not try to estimate your planning, but measure the teams you have, the costs you have. Make sure to do the right thing at the right time with your teams. All right? So this is the final slide with everything in there. And the most important thing is probably here on top. It's not a scaled agile model, right? So don't use it as a model. The important things are here. So we have a layer with vision and reality. We have priorities and values, flexibility and knowledge, predictability and flow. So the first thing is stop starting, start finishing. Marie is here. She needs to decide on things, and she needs to lower her decision points. So she needs to fail fast and learn fast so she can get a faster return on investment. Right? We all know the concept of enterprise backlogs, but how do you create your enterprise backlog? The only thing is to get closer to Carl. Carl, our customer, will guide us and will tell us what we need. And who is the best person to discuss with Carl? It's probably Yuma or our UX expert. So they will feed our enterprise backlog. And on the budget side, your budget is your teams, not the projects you need to do. So invest in learnings and do the right thing now. This is what Paul is a guide for, right? On the flexibility and knowledge, so we need Eva, so the expert, to bringing the expertise into the teams, into your organization. Don't outsource your projects anymore, but bringing your knowledge into your organization. So we need new insights into our backlogs to get a flow. Either you use Scrum or Kanban or another method, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you need to bring in the insights and the flow. And you need to invest in prototypes and probably very much so in happy teams. That's another talk. And to get to this, you need predictability. So you need the right metrics. And if you don't like metrics in organizations, or if your teams don't like metrics, just start with measuring the features. So start date and end date. And then you will create, after a few iterations, you will be able to create the cumulative flow diagram. And this will give you a lot of information on what is going on. How long does it take for an ID to come in my organization before it goes out of my organization? Sometimes it takes months, even years. So start measuring your features by start date and end date, just to see what's going on. And for this, you need stable teams, and you need someone who dares to stop investment when it's not too late. Okay? So key takeaways here: get closer to Carl, and your budget is not your project budget, but it's your teams. It's your teams you need for your investments. So thank you. This is the end, or I just start finishing. So we have some time for questions if you like. Thank you. Yes. I give you a microphone.
So you made a very interesting comment there. So try to avoid estimates. How do you see techniques like wisdom of the crowd or blink estimates to be provided in the beginning as a kind of something to help businesses to try to predict some dependencies? So what do you think about it?
I think it's very important for businesses to try to estimate the value of things, not the amount of work it will cost to start something or to deliver something. So the problem is that now when you go into a business environment, you ask what is your priority, they will start shuffling with costs and maybe cost of delay and things like that. But really the value, it's very difficult to measure value and to say, okay, what's the priority on the business value? For this, those kind of techniques might help, and it's just something that you want to use to create the priorities of the backlog. It's not a technique I would use then further on to say, okay, you said that this feature would take, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, and then you will try to match that. That's not the point. The point is really getting the priorities in the backlog right, in my opinion. So, yes?
Thank you. Just when you have a limited budget, if the most valuable will be maybe really complex and with the same amount, let's say you could do like the 3 next more valuable thing.
That's a possibility. That's a choice. That's Paul. Paul needs to get those kind of discussions going. So what will you do? You will bring in 3 features with maybe a little bit less value, but you're sure that you will get them because we did it before or we got the expertise? Or do you want to risk into something that is the first time we do, and this is the same budget? So that's the discussions we need. That's exactly the point of the backlog and the point of the iterative deliveries. I don't have an answer on this, of course, so it's one or the other. If you want your teams to learn a lot, maybe you will choose the first option, bring in an expert and try a prototype. If you're sure you need to deliver something, you will probably go for the second option. I hope everybody's okay. Is that an answer to your question? Yeah. Some more questions?
I don't remember what exactly did you use, but you used don't use the for the cost of project or estimate of project. Use the cost of your people plus learning. There's an assumption that you have a team there, right? That's under what happens if you don't have a team there.
And how would you deliver something without a team?
So you want to start something.
You want to start something.
Yeah, but you don't know how many people or what type of people you want.
Okay, so if you want to start something, you have an idea probably, and you want to get started. The first thing we use a lot at our company is a design sprint. And with a design sprint, it's like building a small prototype, but you do this with a lot of your potential users. It's 1 week, maybe less, 4 days, 4 or 5 days, where you will just test, maybe even on paper, something that you want to address to your users and say, okay, this is something that you might want to use. How will you use it? And you ask a lot of questions. At the end of your design sprint, you have, in fact, the results of a tested business case. And in your tested business case, you have already a small prototype, but you're certain that your users will use it. And then you can start looking for a team and start maybe looking for people who want to invest in your idea or something like that. Is that an answer? Or?
So I know what the design sprint is, but my question is about not validating the business case. Is about, okay, so for design sprint, how would I tell, do I need 7 people or do I need 3 people to do the design sprint with that? So, because you are moving from the estimate of project to the estimate of people plus learning, right? Yeah. So if I'm a project manager or someone that wants to invest, I would question you, why do you need 7 people? Why don't you can do the design sprint with 4 people? Yeah.
Well, for design sprints, it's probably quite easy to estimate you have 2 or 3 people and you have a design sprint. But you need the right skills, right? To start your project, that's a different story. Depending on what you want to build, if you want to build an app, you will probably need back-end, front-end, UX, and you have 3 people, minimum. So start with what you have, and at the end of the iteration, the first iteration, you will see either you want to make some speed, you will have to add resources, or you're happy with the speed you have, or you don't have more resources, then you just continue with what you have. But the point is, start and try something, and you will see what happens. So don't try to figure out, I need 7 people for 6 months, because if you have them, then it's fine. But again, try to figure out with your backlog how fast you want to go and what you want to do with those people. Some more questions over there?
It's a question when you have a dual IT system, like a legacy system, a lot of, technical debt. So you say that the cost is the team and the learning curve. So you can add it, this technical debt that slow down teams and is recognized by Marie and all the managers all around, if they can acknowledge it.
Yes and no. In fact, the technical debt is the duration of your feature in your backlog. You tackle something, you see it's more complex than we expected, so you will probably deliver a little bit slower. And the point is not to convince the managers that upfront we will have technical debt, but to ask them at the end of the iteration, to acknowledge the delay because of the technical debt, and then to ask them, okay, what do we do? Do you want to continue? We invest in that, or do we need to go another way? With those kind of things, legacy systems, you don't have another way mostly. You just have to continue and go. But the most important thing is to be transparent and to say, sorry, here we had something we didn't expect, and this is the delay that we caused. Remember the dots on the screen, on the diagram? This dot is because of something that we didn't expect, and that's a technical debt problem.
When you have to deal with an ITO, usually it's like they're ignoring. They are creating a dual ITO, like an agile one, with delivering fast, and they said, you see, it's great. And when you have to budget for both system, they don't. It's like psychological. They forget that it's slowed down because all the difficulties and everything to tackle, and that slow down the curve. But it's just experience.
Yes, it's the case. It's a lot of time. It's the case, and again, the question is, what do they budget? They want to budget something with a deadline and say you need to be finished within a month or within a year, but the budget is not changing. It's your team working for a year. The question is, how fast will they go? In one program, they will go fast because it's innovative and it's great. And the other one, with legacy systems, it's really difficult and it's taking time and it's slow, but the budget is the same. The only thing different is the speed that they will be able to deliver things. And that's the discussion you need to trigger. Not, okay, when will it be replaced? You don't know that. Okay, some more questions? Or everybody happy? Okay. Well, thank you very much.